My brother-in-law just told my wife he is in love with her. So here's what happened. Out of nowhere, my brother-in-law reaches out to my wife, asking if she can meet him for lunch. He mentions there's something important he needs to discuss with her. Before saying yes, my wife talks to me about it, wondering if it might have something to do with my sister. She speculates that maybe they're having some issues and he wants to get a woman's perspective on things. It's a bit strange to think about, but I encourage her to go ahead and find out what's going on. She agrees to meet him for lunch at a restaurant close to her office the following day. And that's where he drops the bombshell. He confesses his feelings for her. He goes all out, showering her with compliments about her beauty, talking about how she makes him feel alive and how he would treat her like a queen if she were with him. He even claims it was love at first sight. All the while, he's married to my sister and they have 2 kids together. Before this, he and my wife had always had a friendly relationship. Our families are really close and we often spend time together. He does text her quite often, but it was never anything that raised any red flags. In fact, he's in touch with my mom too, texting and calling her regularly. So none of us ever thought there was anything more going on between them. It's really thrown us all for a loop. I need to pause here and make something clear. My wife isn't cheating on me with him. We actually share an iPad, so I see all her texts, and we're always checking each other's phones. So there's no secret conversations or anything like that going on. Back to the story, my wife didn't even let him finish talking. She walked out right away and called me to tell me everything. While she's on the phone with me, her phone starts buzzing with texts from him. He starts backtracking, saying he didn't mean what he said, that he thinks it's just a passing infatuation, and all that jazz. It's like he's trying to downplay the whole thing and make it seem like it wasn't a big deal. My wife decides to leave work early to come home and talk to me about this whole situation. Her phone is constantly buzzing with calls and texts from him the whole time. I suggest she answers, so she puts him on speakerphone for both of us to hear. He's in tears, practically begging her not to tell my sister. According to him, during our get-together this past weekend, he thought my wife was flirting with him. He believed they had some sort of moment when they were alone in our kitchen. Now let me tell you, my wife has a pretty strong personality and can be quite straightforward. I guess I can see how someone might mistake that for flirting. He then asks if she's told me about it yet, and since I'm right there listening, she says yes. That's when he starts pleading with me too. This back and forth goes on for a while. One of the main things I wanted to know was whether he'd ever cheated on my sister before. He vehemently denies it, even swearing on his kids' lives that he's been faithful. He tries to justify his feelings, telling us that my wife should understand because it's just the way he feels about her. At that point, I'd had enough and told him I wasn't going to make any decisions that night, and that I'd call him the next day to talk more. So here we are, stuck in this awkward and complicated situation, and honestly, I'm at a loss for what to do next. My wife's immediate reaction is for me to drive over to their place right away and tell my sister everything. But the thought of breaking up my sister's family is tearing me apart inside. The idea of what this could do to my nieces is making me feel sick to my stomach. I'm caught between wanting to protect my sister and her kids from this potential heartbreak and wanting to confront my brother-in-law about his actions. It's a tough spot to be in, and I'm really struggling with how to handle it all. I know deep down that the right thing to do is to tell my sister, but I'm also thinking about my wife and the position this puts her in. It's not her fault that my brother-in-law has feelings for her, but I can't help but worry about potential resentment towards her from my family. Even if my sister decides not to divorce him and they try to work things out, I'm not sure if our family dynamic will ever be the same again. There's a good chance things could be strained or even distant between us. This whole situation has the potential to tear my family apart, and that scares me. I really don't care much about my brother-in-law at this point. He's the one who jeopardized our family's peace. But I do care deeply about everyone else involved, especially my sister and my nieces. I'm really torn and unsure about what the best course of action is. I don't want to make a decision that could have lasting negative effects on my family. If anyone has been through something similar or has any advice to offer, I'd really appreciate it. I'm feeling lost and could use some guidance on how to navigate this incredibly difficult situation. Update 1. So it turns out everyone who told me last night that I should tell my sister right away was spot on. A little after midnight, my phone rings and it's my sister. She tells me she has something important to share, that my wife allegedly tried to start an affair with her husband. Basically, my brother-in-law tried to turn the tables and blame my wife for everything. I quickly reassure my sister that's not what happened and tell her I'll be right over. Without wasting any time, I call my parents and my younger brother to fill them in on the situation. My mom and dad immediately head to my sister's place to be there for the kids, while my younger brother comes over to our house to look after ours. My wife and I then head over to my sister's. When we arrive, we find my sister and brother-in-law sitting on the front porch. He looks absolutely defeated, probably realizing that we have all the evidence we need with the texts and voicemails. Honestly, I'm not sure what he was thinking or hoping to achieve by denying everything. My wife hands her phone over to my sister, who reads through the texts and listens to the voicemails. Before my sister even has a chance to respond, my brother-in-law breaks down sobbing. Now, keep in mind, he's a firefighter, a big tough guy, so seeing him like this is quite the scene. The whole situation is just incredibly emotional and overwhelming for everyone involved. My sister, being the strong woman she is, tells him firmly to cut it out, pack his things and leave. She's absolutely disgusted and can't even bear to look at him. Despite his continued begging and pleading, she's got zero patience left for his antics. After sending him away, my sister goes off to have a heart-to-heart with my wife. I watch from a distance as they embrace in a comforting hug, which gives me some relief. They've been close friends since college, and actually, I met my wife through my sister. Their friendship means a lot to both of them, so the idea that this situation could damage it has been weighing heavily on me. Meanwhile, I'm left with my broken brother-in-law. Seeing him in this state, I can't help but feel more sympathy than anger towards him. He keeps repeating how sorry he is, saying he just couldn't help his feelings. I mean, I understand that my wife is an amazing person, and it's not hard to see why someone could develop feelings for her. But come on, man. Eventually, he manages to pull himself together enough to leave. We stay with my sister for the rest of the night, trying to comfort her and make sense of the situation. My sister starts questioning my wife about why her husband would even think that pursuing this would be a good idea. She's baffled because, as far as she knew, they hadn't been having any issues in their marriage. Everything seemed to be normal, just like it always had been. The whole thing is just a confusing and heartbreaking mess. My wife is visibly upset, tears streaming down her face. She reassures my sister that there's nothing to hide and hands her phone over once again. They scroll through every text message exchanged over the past 2 years, finding absolutely nothing inappropriate. My wife has always been her playful self, and the same goes for my brother-in-law. They have a teasing, light-hearted relationship, much like she does with my mom and younger brother. The only incident that my wife can think of is the moment in the kitchen from this past weekend that my brother-in-law mentioned. They both reached for the fridge at the same time, playfully jostling to see who would get there first. He let her win but reached around her waist slowly to grab a beer. My wife felt that the way he did it was a bit inappropriate. She admits she should have called him out on it right then and there, but she didn't want to make a big deal out of it. She wonders if not addressing it at the time gave him false hope. Thankfully, my sister understands and doesn't blame my wife for any of this. Feeling increasingly suspicious, my sister decides to go through my brother-in-law's MacBook to see if there's anything else she should know about. By this point, she's angry and desperate for answers. Somehow, she manages to guess his password and starts digging around. What she discovers is unsettling to say the least. She finds a plethora of photos of my wife saved on his computer. These pictures date back years and they all focus solely on her. For instance, a few years ago, we all went on a couple's trip to the Caribbean. My wife, who usually opts for more modest swimwear, wore a bikini since it was an adults-only vacation. There were around 50 pictures of her in that bikini, all taken without her knowledge. It's clear he's been secretly taking these photos for years. This revelation takes things to a whole new level of creepy. At this point, we're wondering if it's time to consider getting a restraining order. It's a disturbing twist to an already complicated and emotional situation. I'll keep you all updated as we learn more. Update 2. I've told my wife about your comments, and she feels relieved knowing most people here don't blame her. Thanks for that. But the problem isn't over. Last night, my sister talked to her husband so he could explain things. She had my wife on FaceTime to make sure everything was honest. I was quietly listening too off-screen. My sister recorded the whole talk. He confessed he's had feelings for my wife for years, ever since they first met. At that time, my wife and I were dating, but he met her before he met me. My wife and sister have been friends for a long time, and my sister wanted her boyfriend to meet her friends. He initially thought it was just physical attraction, but later he realized his feelings were deeper. My sister almost kicks him out then and there, but she listens a bit more. Finally, she asks him why he thought my wife would leave me for him. He says he thought there was mutual attraction and that they'd start with an affair and go from there. At that, my wife and sister explode, lots of yelling and swearing. The call ends and my wife hangs up, worried about how I'm feeling. She's upset and tells me the attraction was all one-sided. I never doubted that. Even if she found him attractive, I know she'd never act on it. She's just not like that. Early in our relationship, she caught me checking her out as she was getting dressed. She asked if I liked what I saw, then got serious and warned me never to mess up or I'd lose her trust. And she meant it. She takes trust seriously. Anyway, I always knew my brother-in-law was a bit full of himself, but I didn't think he'd be this confident to try something like this. I talked to my sister later, and she's calling a lawyer on Monday to see how she can protect her kids from him. She thinks he's really out of touch with reality. That's all for now. I'll let you know more once things calm down a bit. Final update. This will probably be my last update since it looks like it's heading towards divorce. Thanks for all your comments. They've really helped my wife feel less guilty. So my brother-in-law went back home yesterday, not because my sister wants him there, but because she can't legally keep him out. But they're definitely over now, and I think he knows it too. The lawyer told my sister that with all the evidence of his recent behavior, she has a good chance of getting full custody of the kids. He doesn't seem to want to fight her on that. My sister will be okay. She's moved on and doesn't seem too upset about it. The kids don't know what's going on yet, but my brother-in-law wasn't around much anyway. He often stayed at the fire station or worked late. It's going to be tough on them when they find out what's going on. A lot of people have suggested there might be other women involved, but we haven't found any evidence of that. It really seems like he's just obsessed with my wife. She's blocked his number, but the night he came back home, he emailed her from a new account. The email started with an apology, but then got weird. He said he never got to finish what he wanted to say at the restaurant that day. Then he wrote pages about how much he loves my wife and how desperate he felt, leading him to act the way he did. He brought up their supposed mutual attraction and the tension he felt between them. He also wrote a big section about me, and let's just say he doesn't think very highly of me. He seems sure that I'm not satisfying my wife the way I should be. Anyway, we've sent the email to my sister and the lawyer. It might be enough to get him kicked out of the house. My wife isn't back to her old self yet, but she's getting better each day. She feels guilty for being too relaxed around my brother-in-law. Normally, she's careful to set boundaries with other guys. If you haven't guessed by now, my wife is really attractive and gets a lot of attention from men. But with my brother-in-law, she felt safe since he's family. She thought there'd be no problem. Luckily, she and my sister are still on good terms with no hard feelings. That makes me happy. We'll all be okay. It'll just take time. Thanks to everyone who commented and showed support.